So up to this point, we've talked about the first price index, which is called GDP deflator. It is a price deflator derived from nominal GDP and real GDP. The key feature of this deflator is that it has the weights for the average price that changes over time. So now we want to move on to the other price index, which is called CPI. We say the CPI is the abbreviation for the Consumer Price Index. It is a price deflator derived based on the price of the surveyed consumption baskets. Based on the price that we got for the survey consumption basket for different years, we will be able to come up with the relative price of a particular year's consumption basket to the consumption basket of the base year. Remember that the base year is the year that we use as a reference to come up with the price index. So what does the consumption basket means and how to come up with the consumption basket? The consumption basket is the typical consumptions that made by the general public. To come up with the consumption basket, we survey the consumer to determine the composition of the typical consumer's basket of goods. And then we collect the data on the prices of all items in this particular basket and compute the cost of the basket. So you can think about these two steps as if that you go to the supermarket and then you got the shopping cart, then you go buy goods. In some year, you go buy milks, and then you buy the bread, and you buy a bag of apples. And then you will be able to go to the cashier and then come up with the total price that you get for this basket of goods. And then the next time you go to the supermarket, you collect the same goods, that is the milk, the bread, and apples, and then you go to the cashier again and then scan it and see the price. And then it turned out that in different years, the price can be different. For example, when you have the same shopping cart, in year 2010, you buy milk, bread, and apple, and then the total cost of the basket is $420. However, when you go to the same supermarket again in 2011, the total cost of the basket is $630. So now we have an idea about what does it mean a consumption basket. In here, the reason why we need to survey the consumer to determine the composition of the typical consumer's basket of goods is because we are talking about the price level for the entire economy. Here we emphasize the term typical is because we understand that all the individuals are different. But to come up with the consumer price index for the entire economy, we need to determine approximately the composite of the goods that is consumed, and then we can come up with the price index. After we do that, we can collect the data for all the prices in the consumption basket, and then we will be able to come up with the CPI. We define the CPI as the cost of the basket in the year we are interested in, divided by the cost of the basket in the year of the base year. Of course, if we want to come up with the CPI for each month, then we can put in the monthly data in here. If we are interested in the yearly CPI, then we just use the yearly data in here. And then we have the CPI, which is about the relative price of the cost of the consumption basket in different years relative to the base year. Again, in here, it is a price index. In the general practice, we multiply it by 100. And so you can think about it as that we abbreviate the percentage, and then that becomes the price index. So then how to come up with the CPI based on our consumption basket that we got in the supermarket? It turned out that if we choose year 2010 as the base year, then the CPI for 2010 will be the value of the consumption basket in 2010 divided by the value of the consumption basket in the base year. Given that the base year is exactly the same as the year that we are interested in, so they are exactly the same. Once we multiply it by 100, and that equals 100. How about the CPI for 2011? It turned out that the value of the consumption basket is 630, and then the value of the consumption basket in the base year, that is 2010, equals 420. We divide 630 by 420, multiply by 100, and then we are going to get 150. So that is the CPI for year 2011. So from this example, you can clearly tell again that when we are talking about the price index in the base year, it always needs to be equal 100. Because the price used for the base year is exactly the same as the price we use for the year we are interested in. So then the ratio becomes 1. Once we multiply it by 100, it becomes 100. So now let's move on to look at the detail of the formula of the CPI, and then we will be able to get some properties for CPI. We said that the CPI is the cost of the consumption basket of the year we are interested in divided by the cost of the consumption basket in the year of the base year. Therefore, let me denote two variables as ET and EB. And then we can extend it a little bit. We keep the cost of the consumption basket in the base year as EB, and then we write it out the cost of the consumption basket in year T explicitly. We say it is the sum product of the price and the quantity. In here, the quantity will be how much we consume for the first commodity, second commodity, and the nth commodity, and we have the price respect to each commodity. And then we can rearrange the equation. We are going to collect the quantity for first commodity relative to the cost of the consumption basket in the base year, and then that becomes the term for the first commodity multiplied by the price for the first commodity at day T. And then we can also do the same thing. We have the C2 divided by the cost of the consumption basket in the base year. And then we have it product the price of the second commodity, and so on. So then as you can see in here, the CPI is also the weighted average of the price. The weights are the quantity of each goods in the consumption basket relative to the cost of the entire consumption basket in the base year. Given that, we can identify that these weights are fixed over time because the quantity of each commodity in the consumption basket is fixed. It is the same basket that we go buy goods. And the cost of the consumption basket in the base year are always the same. Therefore, we say that the CPI is the weighted average of the prices, and the weights are fixed over time. And we have a name for such kind of the price index. We call it the Las Paris index. So given the property of the CPI, which is the weighted average of the prices and the weights are fixed over time, is there any problem with the CPI? The answer is yes. It turned out that when we are using the CPI, we find that we may overestimate the price increase. That is because we adopt the fixed weights. Why? When we adopt the fixed weight, then we will tend to upward bias or overestimate the price increase when we use the CPI. That is because when weights are fixed, then it cannot take into account the changes of the consumer's behavior when the price got changed. For example, when you go to the 7-Eleven and then you want to go buy milk and bread every day, and then one day you turn out to find that the milk that you want to buy have the price doubled. Then you may think that, well, it's now way too expensive. Is it possible I can buy some substitutes? For example, buy the soy milks. If the answer is yes, And then if the soy milk price is exactly the same as the price of the milk before the price change, then as the consumer, the change of the price indicated by CPI is not the actual impact of the price change on our daily life, because we can substitute the goods that have the price increase with the goods that is less expensive. So then we call this problem of the CPI is that it ignores the substitution bias. Another cause of the CPI to bias upward is because when we want to collect the price of the goods at different years, then it's possible that we cannot find the goods that are exactly the same. Then we will not be able to control the quality of the goods. So for example, there is a person or an economy that somehow every individual buys an iPhone every year. And then if that is the case, we need to put iPhone into the typical consumption basket when we want to compute the CPI in that case. Then let's look at the price for iPhone over time. If we Google the price for iPhone over time, we will see something like this. That is, somehow the price for iPhone has been increasing over time with different models. So then, if you want to compute the CPI that includes the iPhone, you can only find the product that is approximately similar to iPhone, but not exactly the same iPhone that you compute the CPI, for example, in 2011. In 2011, there's only iPhone 4S available. The price is about 600. I think this is the euro. And then in 2017, the same product lines, iPhone 10, is about 1,100 euro. Therefore, when you want to compute the CPI, you no longer can put in the iPhone price for 4S, but you need to put in the iPhone 10's price. So then, it's as if that the phone price has been increased from 600 to 1010. It's almost doubled. But does it mean that the price for iPhone doubled? In fact, it is not, because in terms of the quality, the function of the iPhone 10 is much better than iPhone 4S. So then if you compute CPI using the 4S in 2011, but in 2017, you use the price for iPhone 10. Then the CPI double, but that doubling not only reflects the price increase, but it also reflects the quality change. When the quality of the product got improved, it's reasonable that the price is higher. But this higher price doesn't mean that the inflation rate is higher, because it's about a goods that is of better quality than the goods that we used to compute the CPI earlier. Because of that, when we observe the price increase, we will take it as the inflation, but it is possible that it reflects the quality change. So we say because of that, the CPI tend to bias upward. After talking about the problem of CPI, which is ignoring the substitution bias and ignoring the changes in the quality of the goods, we want to move on to compare the CPI versus the GDP. We know that both of them are price indices. However, they are different in some aspect, such that the inflation rate computed based on CPI and GDP deflator may be different. First of all, we know that CPI is a fixed basket, so its weight is fixed over time. On the other hand, for the GDP deflator, because the real GDP at the base year are different every year, and the quantity that of each goods that used to compute the GDP differ in different year. Therefore, we know the weights that we use for computing the GDP deflator somehow got changed over time. The second difference of CPI versus GDP is that CPI is about the price of the served consumption basket of the general public. Therefore, the price of the capital goods are not included in the computation because the capital goods price is not consumed. Therefore, we say in here that the price of the capital goods is not included in computing the CPI. But for GDP deflator, because it is about the goods that is produced, so it includes the price of the capital goods. However, you also need to be aware that this capital goods included is only about those that are domestic produced, because GDP is about the goods that is domestic produced. If it is the imported capital goods, it is not included in the GDP deflator. So in here we say that for GDP deflator, it includes those price of the capital goods that are domestically produced. Finally, the third difference of CPI and GDP deflator is that the CPI is about the served consumption basket of the general public. If you buy the imported goods, then the price of the imported goods will be included. However, for the GDP, it doesn't include the imported goods. That is because the GDP is about the goods that is domestically produced. So these are the main differences between the CPI and the GDP deflator, and we complete the discussion related to price indices.